ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prussia.
Hey everybody, welcome to Monday on Define the Fight. I'm very fortunate to have a really good friend of mine, Bruce Nelson, joining me today. He is a former professional MMA fighter and also a bone marrow cancer survivor. So when we talk about defining the fight, sometimes we're sideswiped or hit with a blind spot on things that we can't really anticipate in life. And then how are you going to really navigate that storm? So, Bruce, first and foremost, welcome into Fargo from Ada, Minnesota, joining me on the Define the Fight today. How are you?
Thanks. I am literally glad to be here.
That's good. I'm sure, working for the city, sometimes it's nice to have a little shift in the day.
Get a little break and do something different. Absolutely.
Bruce, you fought on one of my promotions that I had back in November of 2018. And leading up to that fight, we spoke about, training, how you felt, so on and so forth. But little did you know at that point in time that you actually had bone marrow cancer. So, you were talking about fatigue and different components, but let's I really want to dive in on the story of, how you found out and where you're currently sitting now.
Yeah. I've been competing since 1998 in professional mixed martial arts. So it's been a long time, and it was basically supposed to be just another day at the office for me in 2018 for your fight. And just going into it and starting, quote, training camp like a lot of fighters do, probably, 8 weeks, 6 weeks out. The training just felt off, tired, more than usual. I mean, when you train for a fight, you get tired at night, and, it's a big toll on your body, and you put a lot of effort and cardio into it and strength training and all the fun stuff that goes with professional fighting. And there would be just some nights getting into it, I can't go train. I'm just too tired. I just fell asleep on the couch. And then, with professional MMA, you're in weight classes. So my weight class, I'd cut down from about 215, 220 down to about 205. And that was, always something that fighters keep an eye on is their weight. And some nights when I would be too tired to go train, I would wake up the next day, I'd check my weight. Lo and behold, I lost a pound. Like, what the heck? Which
isn't common. So if people don't understand, usually when you're in training camp, you're fighting for every single pound to fall off.
Yeah, for sure. Water weight, body fat, sometimes even some muscle you lose a little bit,
Right.
So it was weird, and this happened more than once. Some nights I was too tired to train again, wake up the next day, weigh myself, more weight's coming off. And I thought, well, hey, I've been doing this wrong all these years. I've been training, sweating, and you know what? And I could sleep on the couch and train and lose weight just as easy. So, but it didn't make sense to me at the time. I had no inkling that this was going on. I had no inkling why I was more tired than usual. I had no inkling why I didn't have the strength I had anymore. So, looking back, when I was diagnosed with it in March or April of 2019, then a lot of it started to make sense. But at the time, it did not.
A lot of question marks. So when you were training leading up to that fight, did you ever go in to the doctor to see what the fatigue was actually stemming for, or what was the after? Why did you go in, and then how did they find it?
Yeah. So training, no. I wouldn't even think twice about going into a doctor unless there was a broken bone or something like that. And even then, probably not.
Try to dust it off, tape it up, call it a good day.
Rub some dirt on it, whatever. I just had, I was 48 during my last fight in 2018. I kind of chalked it up to that. You always look for a reason for something to happen, and you look for that reason for it to make sense to you. And that's the reason that made sense to me, is that I'm 48, probably shouldn't be doing this anymore, But I've been doing it for 20 some years. So just thought, it's like riding a bike, get back on it, keep going. Another fight coming up. So just like I said, another day at the office, and things just weren't stacking up the way they're supposed to be. And the cardio wasn't there, the strength wasn't there, but the weight loss was sure coming off, even taking nights off.
So what
strange.
happened? So what happened after the fight? So you had all these different indicators leading into the fight. Now you spoke about finding out in March, but what was the tipping point that you went in for that they found it?
Right. So just to backtrack just a little bit. So in the fight, it lasted like 45 seconds, which is pretty embarrassing, but that's the way it went. So normally when so the guy threw a front kick at me, he kind of slipped and fell. And so I kind of jumped on his front of his head, and I was trying for a Darce choke, head and arm lock, type deal. And I'm like, I hardly ever lose that grip on a guy. I'm strong enough where I can keep this grip on this guy. And he just popped right out of it, and boom, tagged me a few times, and out I went. So I just thought after the fight, what the heck just happened? Why did it happen? I just couldn't put my finger on anything. So that was November of 2018. January of 2019, I was at work for the city of Ada, and we were trying to jumpstart a vehicle. And it was an older vehicle with a carburetor, so we dumped a little gas down the carburetor, and I was the one dumping the gas down the carburetor, and it backfired. Caught my hand on fire. Ended up having to have a skin graft on my hand. So when they took me to the ER in Ada, of course, they got to take your blood, so they checked my blood. And I didn't really know anything about blood cells, hemoglobin, leukocytes, monocytes, erythrocytes, all that stuff I know now. And they go, your hemoglobin's at 10. I'm like, what does that mean? And apparently with hemoglobin, you have everything in the blood has a scale to it. There's numbers attached to this. A normal hemoglobin scale is 13 to 16. Mine was at 10, so it was low. Again, you're looking for common sense stuff to chalk up an event to. So with the burn, we thought maybe it was low because of the burn. We thought maybe it was a trauma to myself. The hemoglobin went low or something, whatever. But after I ended up with a skin graft, and oddly enough, down at the Hennepin County Medical Center, they never took any blood, because they knew what they had to do. They just, skin graft. They weren't really testing for the blood. But my PA back in Ada kept on it. They're like, how come your hemoglobin's not coming up? How come your hemoglobin's not coming up? And it wasn't. It was staying around 10, going down to 9. And then kind of along with that, they had me on some painkillers. They had me on oxycodone when I was doing my hand recovery. Quit that because it was a small dose of oxycodone for a few days and stuff like that. And my stomach was starting to feel weird. Turns out my spleen was enlarged. Didn't know that. I was starting to puke up every once in a while after I ate. And I called the doctor down at the Hennepin County Medical Center. I said, Doc, does oxycodone have like weird side effects on your stomach? And they're like, no, once you get off it, you should be just fine, So I'm like, okay. So back into the doctor in Ada I went, and they took a few more steps with blood tests and checked it out even further. Said, we better send you down to Fargo. And this is, around the March, April period of time. So I came down to Essentia, and lo and behold, they ended up kind of figuring out that they wanted to do a bone marrow biopsy, see what was going on internally. And that was a lot of fun, a bone marrow biopsy, if you ever had one.
Never have.
No, don't.
Never have. We spoke about the fact of you going into Essentia and they were doing a bone marrow biopsy. Now, clearly, I've never had one. I'm going to and the way it sounds, I don't think I ever really want to. But, do you want to break that down on what it looks like for the biopsy?
Yeah, at Essentia where I went, they put you in a tube. It's very precise. They have lasers and they put you face down, and they drill into your hip. And they literally take a small Makita drill with a little bit of I think it was a spiral drill bit type deal that drills into the bone of the hip and pulls out a little bit of bone marrow. Then, of course, they test the bone marrow. These lasers tell exactly where to drill. So these lasers line you up, and so there's really no mistaking it. It's really a slick procedure. It really hurts. They did give me a little topical to numb the first layer of skin, but there's no numbing the bone.
No.
Unless they knock you out. But they didn't. So
after taking the biopsy and going in and getting the sample that they needed, how long of a turnaround time frame was that when they brought you back in and said, hey, this is our findings?
Yeah, it was a couple days. It wasn't very long. And I actually just got a phone call, and Dr. Taddeo was his name. He was from Brazil. He gave me the diagnosis and said told me what was happening. He said, come on down to Fargo and we'll discuss treatment options and where to send you, because they don't do it at Essentia. The Sanford place with the Roger Maris didn't have a bone marrow transplant center yet. I think it's just up and going now. I think it's recently been going on. The two options I had basically were Fairfield down at the University of Minnesota and the Rochester Mayo Clinic. So I ended up going to the Mayo Clinic. And it was March, April period of time when I got diagnosed. I didn't get down there until August. So a few things had to happen before I could make it down to Mayo, and that was find a bone marrow donor. So basically what that is, it's people hear the word stem cell. So I was kind of wondering what happens with a bone marrow transplant, and dumb me, the first thing I thought of is they go and they suck out your bone marrow, and they don't do that, of course.
Well, hey, you don't know what you don't know, and that's why you have individuals that are experts in that area, so that they can break it down for you.
Yeah, I had no clue what a bone marrow transplant even was at the time. I mean, you hear about things and through your years of being around, and it's really different from a cancer patient with a lump, a tumor, something like this. The bone marrow cancer, it's a blood cancer. And what happens is that the red blood cells come out of the bone and they don't mature. They come out, and a normal red blood cell matures, and it basically kind of expands, and it carries the oxygen through your body. And when bone marrow cancer happens, these red blood cells don't mature, they can't carry oxygen, you suffocate. That's why your hemoglobin gets low, and that's your your oxygen carrying blood cell,
So for you, you're talking about donors. Mm-hmm. What does that whole process look like? And then clearly there has to be a match to make sure that it's suitable for you.
Right. So in my case, lucky me, I have 4 sisters and 1 older brother. My brother was a match, long story short. When we went down to the Mayo Clinic the first time to meet with an initial doctor in the bone marrow transplant center, the guy walked in, and sure enough, he looked like Bill Cosby. And I was
kind of a fudgesicle.
Yeah. I was looking around. I'm like, is this for real? Is this really? I thought just for a second, is this Bill Cosby? Is he just your doppelganger or whatever they call it, your twin is walking around in the face of the earth, and here's Bill Cosby's twin at the Mayo Clinic sitting down with me about my bone marrow transplants. So, and chatting with him a little bit, we talked about family history, and there's no bone marrow cancer, bone marrow cancer is a form of leukemia. In my case, what's called myeloid fibrosis. It's a form of leukemia. Nothing in my family history of it. Really weird. So long story short, again, Dr. Kabidi Bania was his name. And he said kind of right off the bat, he goes, I bet your brother's your match. So 3 of my 4 sisters got tested. A lot of times with male to female, female to male, when they're checking for if you're a donor, a lot of times they're not a match. There's 6 markers that they look for to be a match for your stem cells or your bone marrow transplant, materials. My brother was all 6, so he had to go down to the Mayo Clinic, and they filter out his blood, and apparently when you get new stem cells like what I got, you get about 6 million stem cells at a time. So when the transplant came for me, and I shouldn't say transplant, it's not really a transplant. Everyone thinks about like, oh, you got a kidney transplant, or you got a liver transplant, or a heart transplant. All the transplant was a little bag of blood that they put in an IV and pumped into me. That was my transplant. So it wasn't like your normal kidney, liver, any type of organ transplant. Totally different. But my brother was my donor, and he donated. Usually it takes, when they filter out your stem cells to do this, it takes 2 days, 2 sittings at about 5 hours a pop to get 12, 13 million stem cells. He donated 13 million in one sitting in 4 hours.
Wow.
Right. So my bone marrow transplant doctor is pretty impressed by what my brother did. So he goes, I want to meet your brother one day. So he hasn't yet, but maybe he will. So, but yeah, he donated 13 million stem cells. So the nice thing about that is that if anybody else in the family may need stem cells, they're sitting at the Mayo Clinic and they never go bad from what I was told. So my doctor said the longest that he knows of stem cells in refrigeration there has been about 22 years. So now probably right around 25, 26, 27 years if they haven't been used yet. So
wow, that's impressive.
So yeah, pretty impressive technology down there for sure.
Well, after having the transplant, how did your brother recover? Because was it more for him in regards to recovery than you, or was it about the same?
He was easy. He he was lying in a bed for 5 hours, and they have this machine that just takes out some blood, separates the stem cells. After that, he was done. Got up, walked away. Pretty good. He was a little sore for a little while because they do, induce some steroids or some type of medication to help promote more stem cells to be made.
Regrowth.
Yeah, the regrowth and stuff like that. So he was a little sore for a few days, just like achy bones and stuff like that. But he had the simple part. So thank God for that.
I know looking at some of the images, I was actually looking back at them last night too to see, I'm like, wow, okay, from where you went from, right? From being 205, 215, 220 to what you dropped to in the process of recovering to where you're at now. I want to dive into what did that all look like? Because I know there were not good days. You have some really good days. You have some not so good days, because after clearly getting the transplant, then comes chemo and everything else that comes with it. And, I've had a lot of friends with cancer that have gotten extremely sick. And then some too handled it very well. But again, it comes down to an individual basis.
Right. So the chemo that they gave me was, and I thought this was just absolutely bonkers, is that my doctor goes, well, I think you're strong enough and healthy enough where you can handle chemo 24/7 for about 4 or 5 days. And I kind of looked at it and I'm like, are you sure about this? And he goes, yeah, you can do this. So he started me on chemo in mid-August, and they went 24/7 around the clock for 4 days of just pumping chemo into me, chemo and saline, just water and chemo. And what that did, killed the cancer after about 4 or 5 days right there. There was 2 days of rest in there where they just kind of give you some recovery time. And then the, quote, transplant took place.
Prior to, we were talking about the fact of diving into treatment, and anybody who has clearly worked through for, pushing through with cancer has had different type of adverse effects and different types of treatments that they have chosen. So for you chose to go the chemo route. Now let's talk about what the treatment looked like, and then how your mind and your body were impacted through it.
Sure. The chemo again was it was a chemo IV called busulfan, which is apparently commonly used excuse me, for bone marrow cancer. And again, it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 days, I think it was 4 or 5 days. There was a 2-day rest period when the chemo was completed, and then August 23rd was my quote new birth date. That's when the new stem cells were put through the IV,
Filtering in.
Yeah, filtered in. And how that works is that my doctor Shaw said, we're not really sure how this works, but we know that the stem cells find their way into the bone and start making new red blood cells. I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. So, and sure enough, a couple days later, they started seeing a little bit of rise in the hemoglobin levels. So it was starting to work. I did have a 4-month stay at Mayo, and I was told this in advance because they knew what was going to happen. So here's what happened next was, so I stayed at the Gift of Life House in Rochester, which is about 3-4 blocks away from the Mayo Clinic. They have a bus service that you can ride to take to your appointments, or you can walk, whatever. I got out of the hospital about August 25th, I think it was. So they said you can go back to the Gift of Life House and stay and just, come to your appointments, daily. There was blood draws daily and stuff like that. So I was walking back and forth, and I thought, if all this was, I'm probably going to be fighting again here in a couple months.
Come on now, Bruce.
I know, I'm just kidding. So anyway, it was going good. I was walking back and forth, and I felt pretty darn good. And about 5 days into that, about September 1st, September 2nd, because I remember this, my wedding anniversary was September 3rd. And that year I spent my wedding anniversary curled up in a hospital bed, thinking my gut was just going to explode on me. What happens and why they wanted me to stay for 4 months is that when you get new red blood cells, you have white blood cells, which are your infection-fighting blood cells. The white blood cells see the new red blood cells as foreign material. They attack them, and that's what happened. So they weren't sure how it would affect me or where. And this is called graft versus host. So the new red blood cells get attacked by the whites, and it can cause a variety of issues. Skin hardening. I was checked by dermatology pretty much every day. In my case, I was lucky enough to have diarrhea, colon infection.
Hey, you're just detoxing, man. You're literally flushing it, right?
Right, yeah. My weight went from about 205, 200, 210, right in there, whatever. At the lowest point, when I weighed myself, was about 173 pounds.
Wow.
So over 30 pounds of stuff coming out all the time. And it was weird. The diarrhea wouldn't happen during the day very much, but at night, like 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, just when I wanted to try and get some sleep, boom. I was going to the bathroom every couple minutes sometimes. I'd get out of the hospital bed and I'm hooked up to an IV, so I'd have to unplug it, try and make it to the bathroom. Sometimes I wouldn't. So yeah, that's what happened. I got an infection in my colon from the graft versus host. So that caused diarrhea, and my weight dropped about 30 pounds from that. And about a year later, after I went back for a checkup, my doctor never gave me an indication that you're in any danger, any problems, or anything like that. Never gave an indication of that. He goes, yeah, I was getting a little concerned for you.
Well,
a year later.
Well, who wouldn't be if you're dropping 30
Right.
some pounds
Yeah.
and you're flushing at a rate that you were? Were they able to give you anything? Because clearly you start looking at electrolyte imbalance
Yeah.
and those different pieces, and then too like the malnourishment. Mm-hmm. What were some of the things that they did?
Yeah, they tried to get me to eat as much as possible. I was actually introduced to Premier protein shakes, which I've never really taken before. They were kind of a lifesaver. They helped out a lot. Just keeping my protein levels up. They have a process called photophoresis down there, and that's where they filter your blood. So they hook you up to a machine again and pump out X amount of blood each time, and it filters about 10% of your blood. And they medicate it and hit it with a laser or something like that in there, and it's kind of a cool process. But they included that with a medication. I think it was called Entyvio. Don't quote me on that. I'm not promoting any drugs or anything like that, but I think it was the Entyvio and the photophoresis that kind of changed the course of it. That really helped out with settling that down.
Well, I'm curious. So you're looking at how long of a duration that you had to deal with that, did you say?
From September to around, I got out of there in December 7th is when I came home, actually. So between September and late November.
So you're looking at 3 months that you were dealing with that.
Right. Yep.
So how did that impact you mentally when you know that almost every single night you're getting hit with the same thing? I mean, we look at like the 24-hour flu or 48 hours or whatever we're dealing with at that moment. And then it's like, it seems like it's so unbearable. Mm-hmm. But then when you're looking at 3 months of constant running to the restroom, that had to impact you mentally.
Yeah, it was at night. I mean, during the day, for some reason, it settled down during the day. Mm-hmm. And it really threw my sleep pattern off, of course, because now I'm keeping vampire hours where I'm up at night and, trying to sleep during the day. So it really, really threw that off. It was like having the 24-hour flu for 3 months. And, I look at pictures of myself from back then, and I'm like, ugh, that was me, So the mental strain, I would say the grind of training and putting myself through the physical demands of what I did helped, as far as the mental goes. But at night, when I was sitting there wide awake, it's like, you ask yourself, why is this happening to me? I did. I asked, why is this happening to me? Nobody could answer that, but fought through it. You had to. There was no other choice, so.
And here you are. You knocked it out.
Yeah.
Now you said after those 3 months, then you were discharged from the hospital?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then what was the follow-up, after all of those different shifts?
Sure. The follow-up is at the time, it was every 3 months, go back down to Mayo. Blood tests every 3 months, checkups every 3 months. Now we're at about 6 months out. In recovery after that, when they sent me home, I was on 17 different medications because I had no immune system. So the chemo wiped out my immune system. They wiped out pretty much everything. And they wanted to slowly build your immune system back up. So I was on like prednisone, medication called fluconazole, and I'll just spare you all the details, but there was 17 medications that I was on. Slowly, after a couple of years, it started to go down. 17, 15, 14, 13. I went off my last medication in April. So, and that was one medication my doctor said I'd be on the rest of my life.
That's awesome.
So.
And how are you feeling now when you're looking at all the different things that you went through? Being on the meds, I'm assuming with 17 different meds, there clearly were different adverse effects, right? But at the same point, now being off, how are you sitting? Now, we spoke about being, we talk about cancer and remission, but you had spoke to me about the fact of with bone marrow cancer, it's not remission, it's cured.
Right. With some types of cancers, like lump cancers, tumors and stuff like that. They talk about remission with what I had, and some people can live with this for, I was told, years. And there's a medication called Jakafi that helps keep the symptoms under control and lead a semi-normal life. You're a little bit tired at times and stuff like that with this type of cancer, but people can stay on this medication called Jakafi for a longer period of time, function. But with mine, once the chemo treatments were done, I was cured. 4 or 5 days into it, it was cured. So
when it comes to the fight of cancer and when it comes to the fight of life, how is this different than the other fights that you have gone in to face?
The similarities are this: nobody fights alone. When you're training for a fight, you have training partners, you have teammates, sometimes you have sponsors. When I found out that I had cancer and the fight that I had on my hands, family rallied, community rallied, county rallied, state. A lot of people that I knew rallied. So I knew I wasn't in it alone. I mean, yeah, I was in the hospital bed by myself, but I'm in the cage by myself. So similar there. You learn that people are willing to help. You learn that people are looking out for you. And you learn that you should return the favor at some point in time somehow by being a good person, by never letting, I shouldn't say never letting anything get you down, because things get you down for sure.
But not staying in that spot.
But not staying down. It's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get back up. What's the saying? If you get knocked down 7, get up 8, something like that. What I learned from this fight can be overcome. Not everybody that gets cancer survives. And that's a shame, of course, but Father Time's going to get us all someday. But to go out like this at an early age of 48, that would have been a shame, of course. You fight through it, and you just can't stop fighting regardless of your situation. If you really, really want to fight through something, you can.
Yeah.
Just got to get up off the floor or get up off the ground or whatever. But yeah.
When you look at small communities and how they really band together, I know you had different T-shirts and clearly silent auction, all those different things too. And you and I had a friend also that his funeral was last week. Yep. Ronnie Oren.
Ronnie Oren, right.
An amazing man, close friend, especially to my father, with working construction together. He was a very instrumental man to a lot of people, from coaching to his kids, you name it. He was proud of everybody.
Right.
And it was a different type of funeral, but a different type of funeral in a good way, where people were standing, clapping, and recognizing that we only have one life to live. And like you said, no one's invincible. We never know when it is our time. But at the last point too is, I know between you and I and other individuals too, is that we're going to go down swinging.
Yeah.
And that's what you did in your fight. It's like, hey, I'm here. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to keep fighting. And if it happens to be my time, well, then so be it. But I'm not just going to lay here and sit in this space and do nothing.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. I hope everybody listening can get the message at some point in time that, yeah, bad stuff happens. I was lucky. I was fortunate. I was able to overcome this with the help of family and friends and people around me. And not everybody's that lucky. But everyone has the will to fight.
They do.
Everyone has the will to try.
And you had mentioned in regards to supporters too. So when you're looking at who are the people that you want in your corner, this is a great time in life too to say, hey, who are those positive individuals that would literally do anything and everything for you, and vice versa? Who are those people that you would do and return the favor to. We're in such a crazy, crazy time, and we're starting to see clearly cancer on the rise. And we know with just alone in the Ada community area, there's a lot of individuals right now. Same within Norman County. I had no idea some of the individuals who are, whether it's a stage 4 or whatever that level is, that are currently fighting. So if you right now are facing cancer or something life altering where your health is impacted, find those people and know that you're not alone in this fight. And it's all about mindset and pushing through and, also being proactive. What are some different things that may need to shift in your life so that you can improve your overall health? And I know a lot of us sometimes wait until something happens instead of saying, hey, what am I putting into my system right now?
Right.
Where are my stressors?
Yeah. For me, if I had to describe my support system in one word, family. No doubt my family would be tops of my list all the time. Every time. So, yeah. As far as my cause, and this is my situation, that, there's plenty of causes of cancer out there: smoking, drinking, types of chemicals that we, know of, and so on and so forth. Not really sure what happens. I was kind of looking up the causes of myeloid fibrosis beforehand. There's nothing in my family history of it. Genetic mutation was used when I was down at Mayo. Who knows? Maybe in 5-10 years they'll have an answer for me. I don't know. They might. But if something like this does happen, lean on your family.
100%.
Not everybody has that luxury.
So then you lean on your friends.
And lean on your friends.
Lean on your friends.
Absolutely.
Well, Bruce, I am so grateful for having you on Define the Fight today and reconnecting, because
Sure.
A couple months ago you had reached out pertaining to a mixed martial arts fight. Now you got sought out for matchmaking and then asked if I would want to jump on board to help promote. I'm looking forward to the event coming up August 31st at the Sky Dancer Casino and
Right.
Resort. It's going to be a good time.
It's been a while since I've done a matchmaking on for mixed martial arts, but while I was competing, I did shows. I did 17 different shows with the Dakota Fighting Championships, and I was, after bone marrow cancer, I was kind of like, do I really want to be involved with mixed martial arts anymore? And I wasn't really training, and I'm kind of back to training once in a while, and for whatever goofy reason, the Sky Dancer Casino reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to put on a fight? And I said, well, I'll talk to you about it. What do you got? So they started chatting with us, and then I got into a little bit of a spot where I needed some help, and that's where you came in, and here we are.
Hey, we're in each other's corner, and that's what it's all about.
sure.
So from going from one fight into the next, and
Yep.
that's what it's all about.
Right.
So if you are struggling with anything in your life right now, know that you have individuals that are willing to help you out. Define that fight, because at the end of the day, it is yours to win, whatever that may look like. Things are temporary. And we only live life once, so make sure that you're living it to the fullest. So thank you so much for joining us on Define the Fight.
Thanks for having me on.
You got it, and see you on Monday, where we have Stephanie Getz coming in.